I know you guys can see me, by the way. I'm just tweeting this, and then hopefully it'll be good. I lowered the uh, resolution, so I'm hoping that'll help. I can see the video still pretty choppy, but wait for a couple more people to get in here. Let's see. Let me just check the Discord real quick, and then I swear I will get going. I don't think anyone's even here right now at this very moment, but I know some people are watching. Sorry. This is not going well so far. I just gotta fix this link. Hello, everyone. I am going to be. Hold on. Okay, so now we're good. Okay, 3 people are here. Hello, 3 people. Welcome to my Us review, basically. If you weren't here a few minutes ago when I tried this the first time and it didn't go very well, it's still very choppy, I know, but I'm just going to do it at this point because I'm here and I have the stuff and I've tried this 3 times. So I'm probably going to ask for technical help from Jake next time I'm over at his house. But until then, I'm here. Hopefully, even though the video is choppy, you will still be able to hear my voice for the most part, and that should be fine from what I heard the first time. Basically, the video's choppy, but the audio should be fine. So, that's what you're here for anyway. No one needs to look at my face for very long. So, hi Finn, welcome. Hugo time. I don't know if it's Hugo time. Hugo time is generally when I'm mad about something. And here, today we're talking about something I'm not mad about, and that's Jordan Peele's newest film, Us, straight off his hit Get Out from, I believe, a couple of years ago. This is his second horror film, his second directing role, his second directing and writing role. And spoiler free first, I think he did a really good job. I thought the movie was excellent. I thought it was actually a lot better than Get Out. I liked Get Out, but a lot of that had, how do I put this, more of comedy slant. You could tell it came from someone who had a background in comedy. A lot of that was dark humor, and obviously it worked in with the horror aspects, but it felt a little lighter, even though it's obviously about these dark, like, real issues. Us, on the other hand, felt more along the lines of a traditional horror thriller with humor built in, but it felt very natural. It felt like the characters were just behaving, as a family, like the dad tells dad jokes. It didn't feel like this is a comedy bit somebody's putting in. For the most part, there's some good comedy horror gags in the movie that are pretty good, which I'll get to maybe in the spoiler part, but overall, very good. There was some really great setup and payoff, which is interesting. I also noticed that in Get Out, Jordan Peele tends to do what I would call setup and payoff gags. For instance, in, I don't know, maybe in Get Out, it's been a couple years now. I think I can talk about spoilers a little bit for that movie, but the grandfather was someone who felt very bad because they were beat in a race by, who was it? What's his name? Reggie Jackson, I want to say. I could be wrong. I'm sorry if I'm getting that wrong. The, fast African-American Olympic runner or something like that. And there's some gags in the movie about that. This movie does the same thing. There's a bit with a flare gun. This isn't really a spoiler. I guess it's just a single gag in the movie. But just to illustrate what I'm talking about, earlier in the movie, Tim Heidecker, who is in the film and is very good, is talking to the father of the main family, and they're talking about their boats, and what he says, "Have you gotten a flare gun yet?" This is in a sentence. It feels natural in the movie. And then later in the film, not to get into spoilers yet, but there's a situation in which the father finds a flare gun and is going to use it, and you think, oh, it's a setup and payoff. In writing, this is called often Chekhov's gun. I would call this Chekhov's gag, because it's said, if you write in your story that there's a gun on the wall in Act 1, that gun better be used in Act 3. Jordan Peele does that a lot, and in this film he uses that subversion of your expectations, haha, Ryan Johnson jokes, I get it, to his favor. It works very well. The acting is excellent. I'm gonna butcher these. I pulled up the IMDb just so I could, Jesse Owens, that's what it was. Thank you, person in chat. Let me pull up the IMDb because I'm gonna butcher these names. Lupita Nyong'o. Sorry if I got that wrong. She's the main woman. She's actually the woman who's in the thumbnail of this video. She plays the mother. Actually, a dual role. The main character of this movie all play dual roles, because if you know the premise of this film, it's essentially this family goes to their vacation home. One night, while they are there, a family shows up, and it is doppelgangers of them. And all of the characters are playing dual roles. The main character, Lupita, is excellent. Not only does she do this excellent, very vulnerable, very real performance as this mother who is going through this stuff and trying to protect her children and her family, and also dealing with some psychological trauma from her own past. Not only that, on the flip side, she's playing almost the opposite character, which is kind of the premise of the movie, and that is this psychopathic killer doppelganger with this raspy voice. And I don't know what the story is behind if she came up with this voice or if Jordan Peele had this idea and wanted her to do this, but whoever's idea it was, it worked very well. And she did a fantastic job. The rest of the family, of course, also does a really great job, but I specifically wanted to single her out because hers was the standout performance. The kids surprisingly do a really good job too. I'm not a huge fan of child actors and actresses, just because it's not their fault. It's just hard for a kid, unless it's a very particular circumstance, to be able to buy in and act. It's a hard thing for adults to do, much less a child. But the utilization of the kids was really good. I think they did a good job. I believed that they were kids in danger. I believed that the evil versions of them were evil little bastards, and that was pretty good. So, performances really great all around. And I want to give a special notice to Tim Heidecker of Tim and Eric Awesome Show fame for his performance as the token white dad in the movie. He's hilarious. And again, I'll talk about it more when I get to spoilers, but he might be one of my favorite parts of the movie, and he's a very small role, but what he does with it's very fun. As far as other non-spoiler stuff, I guess I would just say, overall, if you liked Get Out, I would highly recommend you see this, because if you liked Get Out, I think you'll really like this movie. I think Us is the stronger film, thematically. It feels like Jordan's more comfortable in the role as a director now. I know that sounds a little weird, it's only his second film, but there were shots where I was like, that's well thought out. It very much seems to me that when he sat down and wrote this, because he is both the writer and the director, when he's writing the scenes, he has the shots in mind as he's writing them. It's a well-paced film, it's well thought out, and I'm not a big fan of the whole auteur filmmaking theory, but you can see a style here, and you can very much see his style of making forming as he continues to make these, and I'm really excited to see what he does in the future with future films and the Twilight Zone, which he is going to be hosting and writing and producing on CBS All Access, which I'll talk about maybe a little bit at the end, what I'm going to expect from that, since it's kind of tied in, and when else am I going to talk about that? So, let's see. I'm going to get into spoilers now, so if it bothers you to watch spoilers and you haven't seen the movie, now's the time to leave. I know there's not a ton of people here, but that's fine. I get it. Come back and watch this as an archived thing later once you see the movie. So I'll give you like 10 seconds, and then, yeah, I'll do some spoilers. We'll just kind of go through the movie plot point by plot point and talk about what worked, what maybe didn't work as much, stuff like that. So, okay. So, the movie opens. Interestingly, I found this. I think Jordan Peele knows the power of stillness and making your audience wait. Because the film opens on just a static shot, flat, of a TV, and it's the 1980s or so. And we just see some commercials. Some of them are setups for the plot of the movie. They're, like I said, Jordan Peele has very strong setups and payoffs in his films, it seems so far. You have Hands Across America advertisement, and if those of you who don't know, my girlfriend didn't know about Hands Across America. I kind of know about it. I don't know specifically what it was like the charity for, but Hands Across America was a thing in which, and they explain this briefly in the movie, I think, people for charity all across the country like held hands in a chain, and it made a chain all the way from coast to coast. That comes up in the movie later, but that opening shot also has something else Jordan Peele really likes to have, his Easter eggs and little like calls and foreshadowing. Like there's a Chuds video VHS on a shelf, which oh god, what does Chuds stand for? Something underground dwellers, which ties into the movie as well. Oh, the movie also opens with a little text, which I found the text part to be a little how do I put this? Cliche. It even did the thing where it's like one line of text appears and it's black background. Second line of text. Third line of text. The third line of text is like, there are so many underground tunnels in the United States and no one knows what they're for. And then all the text disappears but the last line, and then the last line disappears. If you've seen basically enough movies over the past 10 or 15 years, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like, we're emphasizing this thing. Pay attention to this thing. It's a little in your face, and it's at the point where I'm getting a little annoyed. I feel like it's sort of cliche. So, you know, I guess maybe that bothers me more than it'll bother you, but I noticed it. So moving on from the opening shot we cut to, it's like 1986 or something like that. It's the 80s, and the main character, the mother, who we see as a little girl, is at the carnival with her father and mother. This carnival is on a beach also. It's like a boardwalk thing. The little girl goes missing, winds up in this, this is a good gag too, actually. It's this forest, and it's like the chief's forest, and another good, like, ah ha ha ha, wink wink, nudge nudge. It's, find yourself under it. So it's like a little, it's like a haunted house almost, like a cheesy, fair haunted house, except it's done up like a forest, and it's like chief's forest, and it's like a probably not okay anymore Native American in whatever outfit. And later in the movie we see it again in modern day, and it's been changed to like Merlin's forest, and that was kind of a funny gag. Like at some point they had to change the Native American fair thing, which is even weirder when you get into what the movie's about at the end, but I'll talk about that when we get to it. So the little girl goes into this attraction. Oh, thank you. Cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers. That's what Chuds stood for, which ties into the movie. But so she goes into there. There's one jump scare. Luckily, Jordan doesn't do a ton of jump scares in this movie. It's more about the creepiness and the fear of the actual situation. I'm not a big fan of jump scares. Jump scares to me, especially in like a horror movie, are so cheap because it's not scary. Jump scares aren't scary, they're startling, but that's not fear, that's being startled. It's like if a comedy, if instead of writing jokes, they just paid someone to come to the audience and tickle you. Like, that's not funny, you're just making me laugh. You know what I mean? I feel the same way about jump scares as I would that, so, I don't know. There's one jump scare, but it's not, like, accompanied by that big loud bang noise, like in It. You had, whenever there was a jump scare, like really loud Rah! Noise or music or whatever to try and get the audience to freak out. So, after that, she runs into, It's a hall of mirrors as well in there. And it's very well shot, very well done. And she gets to a point where she turns around and it is herself. Not a mirror reflection, but like, the premise of the movie, the little clone of herself. Then it cuts, goes to the future, or the present rather, and now the mother and the family have come back to the area that was in when she was a kid, and they're at their summer home, which is there near the beach. Now, interestingly, I think this ties into the themes of the movie that I'll talk about a little bit at the end, and that is they have a summer home. Their friends, Tim Heidecker and his wife, also are pretty wealthy. They bought a boat. It's a shitty boat, but the family is very much, I would call, middle class aspiring to be upper class, if that makes sense. And I think that ties into, again, the themes of the movie. So various things happen, some creepy stuff. A bunch of coincidences start happening to the mother, like a frisbee gets thrown towards them and it falls perfectly on a circle, like, so they match up, and there's a spider that's next to a toy spider that's like sort of a foreshadowing of the doppelganger situation. It gets to the point where the dad's like, okay, we're gonna go to the beach. She doesn't want to go to the beach. She ends up telling him all about what happened, and the night that she saw the other her, she ended up getting traumatized and didn't speak for a really long time, and her family had a lot of issues because of it. Sorry, my throat's a little dry. And the dad, of course, does not believe her at first until we get to the second act of the film, let's say. I believe the first act is basically the setup. They're in their home, you meet the cast of characters. The second act begins, you get what's in the trailers mostly, what you would consider your home invasion, the strangers sort of setup, where the family shows up, the doppelganger family. There's sort of a home invasion situation, all very well paced. Again, I think Jordan Peele understands that fear doesn't exist in the moment where the loud thing happens, unlike a lot of other people who work for Blumhouse, who tend to just feel like jump scares are the way to go. He understands that the fear exists in the moments of tension between when things happen. It's not about, and I know this is a cliche, but it's true, and a lot of horror directors these days, I don't think, understand this, or at the very least, if they do understand it, don't care and go for the cheap, laughs anyway. So there's a lot of really good, the kids will scamper off, the doppelganger kids, and you don't know where they are, and they're just being creepy somewhere. Maybe you hear some noises, all well done. This is where we get the first performance of the main woman doppelganger, whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce again because I probably did such a bad job the first time. They explain the situation. She says to her real self, she tells her a story and says, there was a little girl, implying that it's her. This little girl had a shadow, implying it's herself. And she goes on to tell a story about how the real little girl got to, have Christmas and family and meet a husband that she loved and have a family that she loved. But this shadow, the doppelgangers, are forced to live underground and, eat raw meat. And they, have to mirror what is happening above ground, but in a much darker way and in a way that they have no control over their own lives. Which, okay, interesting. I feel like at this point that would have been maybe enough, and I don't need any more explained. Of course, the movie goes on to explain more later, which causes some problems, but we'll get to that when we get to that. So the whole second act, for the most part, is them dealing with them in their own house. There's some boat antics with the dad that's pretty good. Lots of horror gags that work really well. This is, I think, why a comedy person like Jordan Peele can slip really easily into a horror genre like this, because horror and comedy work on the premise of setup and payoff, and timing is a huge part in both. And many of the gags here, I was in a theater with a decent number of people. A lot of people laughed, and not in a this isn't working way, but in a this is both terrifying and the way you did it was a little bit funny kind of way. There's some gags with the boat not running and then it'll run, and I can't explain it if you haven't seen the movie, but if you've seen the movie, you understand what I'm saying. And all of that's timed very well. So after that, they make their way over to Tim Heidecker and his family's house. Now their family is more, I would consider upper class ish. They're the token white family, which is pretty fun. Tim Heidecker in this movie plays such a dad. It's very funny. He plays him and his wife play stereotypical upper class unhappy married couple. They both drink pretty constantly, but not like that they're like sloppy drunk. They're just like functional alcoholics who don't like each other very much. So that's a lot of fun. And then the twist, the first twist of the movie, I suppose, happens. Tim Heidecker and his wife and their children also have doppelgangers that show up at their house. Now, these doppelgangers murder the fuck out of them. It's pretty excellent. There's another good comedy gag here where they're using like a Siri, but they don't call it Siri or Alexa or whatever. I forget exactly what it's called. But Tim Heidecker's wife is getting brutally stabbed, and the violence in the movie is pretty good too. It's fairly visceral. It's not like, I wouldn't call it super gory. It's not like you see a ton of stuff. There's definitely a lot of blood, but it's not like Old Boy where you have people ripping out teeth or anything. It's just lots of stabbing with the scissors. They never explain where they got the scissors, by the way, but whatever. So the wife is trying to go away, and she's like, Alexa, call the police. And then Alexa's like, playing Fuck the Police by, oh god. Who did that? The people from Straight Outta Compton. That movie. I know more about the movie Straight Outta Compton than the people who actually were in it. Anyway, that's a pretty good gag. So you have lots of, the family shows up, and this is where Tim Heidecker really shines. Tim Heidecker's shadow, let's call it. I believe in the movie they had a different name for the weird doppelgangers or whatever, but let's call them shadows for now. The shadows tend to keep the mannerisms, at least to an extent, of the people they are shadows of. Tim Heidecker, because his character was such a dad, Tim Heidecker's shadow, I don't know how to explain this other than he's a serial killer dad who walks around and is like, just being a dad. Like, he's literally like shimmying around and looking for victims to murder. It's amazing. And it seems like he had a lot of fun with that role. So I'm glad he was in the movie and we got to see that, because he had much dad energy while murdering people, which is something you don't get to see a lot. Yeah. So after that happens, we get into the third act, and that's when the family goes back to the beach. They go back to the beach where everything started, where the mother, as a child, saw herself. At this point along the way, many of the other doppelgangers have been dealt with, have been killed. The father, the children. The only one left standing is the little boy doppelganger and the mother doppelganger. Once they get to the beach, the little boy doppelganger sets a trap for them. He's into fire. Again, a lot of the doppelgangers' eccentricities tend to be like dark reflections of what the normal people do. For instance, the kid in the movie has this magic trick. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but there's essentially rings that you can buy in magic shops or on Amazon or whatever that create a spark. It's like a lighter, kind of. And the doppelganger, him, is really into fire. So he sets this trap of fire and this burning car, which the other kid, the real kid, knows is going to happen, because a lot of times in this movie there's sort of mind games of like, oh, what's he going to do? I know what he's going to do because he's like me. If I were doing this, I'd do that. I kind of wish they'd done that a little bit more, actually, and played off the fact that they are basically each other. But, you know, it's only a 2-hour movie. You do what you can do. The kid ends up, the main kid, the normal boy. This is hard to explain. Sometimes in the movie it's it's stated that the doppelgangers are basically like puppets connected to the normal humans. So when a human does a certain thing, the doppelganger has to, but it seems like in certain situations they don't have to. Like, maybe they can will themselves not to be controlled, but if you really focus on it, you can make them do things. So the little boy like walks backwards, which makes the doppelganger walk backwards into a fire. That was a little cheap. I wish they had explained the rules of when and why doppelgangers will or will not copy you a little bit better, because there wasn't even a line that was like, and I'm not a big fan of like really blatant exposition, but it just left me feeling a little bit like, could they do this all the time? Because it feels like there are other times this could have come up. It felt very selectively useful. That's how I'd put it. It was plot convenient. At this point, the mother goes down to Merlin's forest. It's been changed to Merlin's forest, and goes in, finds a secret lab underground. This is where the underground tunnel stuff comes into it. Finds, oh, by the way, the little boy, the normal one, gets kidnapped by the doppelganger mother after he kills the doppelganger son, and takes him underground, and that's why the mother's going there to get her kid back. There, they exposit what exactly is going on, and this is a little bit convoluted and also not explained super well. It's hard to explain if you haven't seen it. Basically, it's implied and stated that the government started cloning people in order to control them. So these doppelgangers, what the government wanted to do was make clones of these people above, basically everyone in the country. Yeah. And basically use the doppelgangers to control the people up above, but it essentially worked the opposite. The people up above control the doppelgangers, and the doppelgangers don't like it. And the doppelgangers think that the reason it doesn't work is because when you clone a person, it doesn't clone their soul. It's two people sharing the same soul, and it's weird or whatever. It's kind of esoteric. That's fine. I don't mind that being vague, but whatever. And then the two mothers have this dance fight, which is excellent. And I know that sounds bad, but no, it's explained that once the little girl saw her doppelganger, she ran away, and then the doppelganger was like, why didn't you take me with you? We're just human beings. We just want to have a life of our own. We are forced to be down here, and everyone left us here. The government isn't there anymore. It's just the doppelgangers. Yeah, the cam's really laggy. I apologize. I'm gonna have to fix my settings or something. I lost my train of thought. Shit. So they do this dance fight, and it's explained that, yeah, the doppelganger's like, why didn't you take me with you? We're just human beings. We want dignity. We want to be acknowledged and have our own lives and not be tethered to you people. And then they get into a dance fight. Which is great. It uses that remix of that song from the trailer. The creepy one works pretty well. At the end, the mother kills the doppelganger, takes the little boy, they get the fuck out, and all the family's fine. At that point, it's also explained that the doppelgangers, in a show of solidarity, are doing their own hands across America. That literally, it's kind of a creepy image, actually. They're all in red jumpsuits, and from coast to coast, they're holding hands. Just to be like, hey, we're here. They were also murdering, they're real people, but they're kind of crazy, so you get it. So, now the twist. The twist is revealed that in the 1980s, when the little girl was down there and met her doppelganger, the doppelganger switched places with her. So the mother we've been following the whole movie has been the doppelganger the whole time, and the one who was there killing everyone was the original little girl, who was then forced to be underground with the other doppelgangers. That's a twist which, honestly, I kind of saw coming from, frame one of the movie when they showed the little girls, and this is just because I do editing for the show, so I think I'm pretty conscious of, where edits are placed in shots and why they are there. In the movie, it cuts in the scene where the little girl meets the other little girl right before anything happens. And I thought they switched places. That's why the cut was where it was. So I kind of ruined it for myself, but can't do anything about that. Now, some people are probably going to think that twist doesn't really work. It just feels like it's in there for no reason. And at first, I kind of agreed and thought it just felt like a twist for the sake of a twist. Kitty, what are you doing? Sorry, my cat's in here fucking around. But I think the twist makes more sense in light of what I think the major themes and meaning of the movie is, because just like Get Out, the movie isn't surface level. It isn't just about literally doppelgangers coming to murder uh, the people that they are doppelgangers of. It's metaphorical. And here's what I think the metaphor is. In the movie where the doppelgangers show up in the house for the first time, and they're explaining what they are doing and why they are doing it to the real family. The real family asks, "Who are you?" And they say, "We're Americans," which felt like a line that doesn't really make sense unless he's doing it intentionally. It seems to me that the point of the movie is that this middle class family aspiring to be upper class are essentially most of America. They're us, for lack of a better word. Um, and the doppelganger people who are forced to live underground and forced to live these awful shadow lives uh, of the people above are. I'm not quite clear, but it's either like the lower class or uh, more specifically, potentially like third world sweatshop labor. Like, our lives are great, but it only exists because many of the products and services we used are built upon a foundation of what is effectively slave labor in the third world. And I feel like the entire point of the twist at the end about, oh, it was the doppelganger was the person we were following as the protagonist the whole time, and the antagonist was the real one. The point is that there is no real difference between us and them. There's no real difference between myself and some kid in some third world country who has to, work every day making, 3 cents a day making socks or something. We're all human beings, which is stated several times in the movie. The doppelgangers say this. We are human. We are flesh and blood. We have feelings. You see us as this lesser thing, but we're not. So that seems like the general point of the movie to me. That final twist is to really push the point home is that not only is it wrong that these people are underground and like being treated like shit and not allowed to live their own lives, but they're not the other. It's not just not right to make the other in a shitty situation and have their lives be shit. It's the fact that there is no other. We're all the same. And I think that's kind of what he's getting at. I could be wrong. That's just, I have to see it again to really think about it. But that's kind of what I sussed out from the basic points of it. So let's see. If anyone has any questions about the movie or about what I thought of it, you can ask now because I'm going to wrap this up soon. But just before that, I guess I'll talk briefly about the upcoming Twilight Zone and what I think about that. So on April 1st, the first 2 episodes of Jordan Peele's Twilight Zone will be premiering on CBS All Access, which is the same streaming service that Star Trek Discovery is on. Actually, Star Trek Discovery, by the way, if you didn't like Season 1, especially if you didn't like it because of the darker tone, I would highly recommend you check out Season 2, because it lightened the tone a lot, but not to the point that it feels like forced or anything. And I think the writing is just a lot more like Star Trek, if that makes sense. Like, you have these standalone episodes. Certainly there's a through line, and it's a lot more connected than previous series had been, but I actually like it. And I think the guy who plays Spock in this season, actually, he gets Nimoy's mannerisms down. The voice is a little bit off, but the mannerisms are spot on. So, check out Season 2 if you haven't yet. And Captain Pike is excellent. So, Twilight Zone. I think the series is interesting. The Twilight Zone has been rebooted. Hey, kitty. The Twilight Zone has been rebooted multiple times at this point. It was rebooted in the 80s, shortly after the movie premiered, the Twilight Zone movie, where John Landis got some kids killed, if you remember that. Kitty, could you not make noise right now? Thank you. And then it was rebooted in the early 2000s with Forrest Whitaker as the host. Now, the original Twilight Zone is a classic. Rod Serling is like a personal hero of mine. He was, if you've never seen an interview with him, there's a really good interview I actually watched the other day. I think I tweeted it if you want to go look at my Twitter. But it was like an hour-long talk he gave at a university in like 1966, physics, I want to say, at like the University of California or a university in California. And that was pretty interesting. He talks about sort of some of the political issues of the day and censorship and what he wants to say on TV. It's pretty interesting. So that show, timeless, excellent, lots of great moral lessons and tropes that have lived on to today. The revival series in the 80s, it was hit or miss. It had some really great episodes. Like there's one where a guy ends up in he's really looking. It came out in the 80s, sort of the tail end of the Cold War, and there's this guy in an episode who has a bomb shelter, and not only has it, he's like excited to use it. He's like, I'm so glad when the world will be done or whatever, I'll just be down in my bomb shelter all by myself. Bombs go off, he goes down there with another person, he basically goes crazy. And then the twist at the end, the Twilight Zone twist, is that the whole world, it wasn't like a World War III situation where the whole world was destroyed, like a local power plant that was nuclear or something, or like a missile randomly went off and like he's the only one there, like they domed it in and he's just stuck there and he got his wish. The world is fine, he's just down there alone living his own little personal apocalypse. So, Twilight Zone 2001, 2002, I want to say. Hasn't aged well. It only ran for one season, and what is Forrest Whitaker? Forrest Whitaker's the host. He wasn't like a writer or anything on it. And by the way, I think the host aspect is something you should like have in the Twilight Zone. I don't think it necessarily has to be the writer and producer of the show like it is with Jordan Peele. I think it's great. I just think it tends to be hard to find a talented like triple threat who can act and write and like direct and stuff. So Rod Serling's and your Jordan Peele's don't come along very often. Forrest Whitaker was a fine choice just to be like host guy, but in every episode it's pretty clear what they did was, because he wasn't like the writer, he wasn't on set all the time, he wasn't a producer, so he wasn't there. They had him step in front of a green screen and just do like all his little Twilight Zone Rod Serling intros all in one shot. So they green screen him into like every episode and it's real bad. That series had a couple good episodes. Like they had a sequel to It's a Good Life, for instance, which was the episode in the original Twilight Zone where that little boy was in charge of the town because he had like god powers. The sequel was pretty good, but that's all I really have to say about Twilight Zone 2001 or 2002 or whatever. It wasn't that great, but it's worth checking out just to be like, what is this all about? Theme song is real dated too. Go look that up later. So Twilight Zone 2019, I think, is in good hands. I think Jordan Peele has shown himself competent as a writer and director and producer over his last few films, over his tenure in Key and Peele. And I think he has a real eye for tackling social issues in a way that doesn't feel, I don't want to say forced, because, I mean, talking about social issues is something we should do, but in a way that is, he does it deftly. He does it with a very deft hand, I'll put it that way, because you don't want your social commentary to be too overt. Otherwise, you end up with, like, Star Trek half black, half white, half black episode, which is a great episode, but, like, that's pretty fucking blatant, isn't it? I think this kind of thing works better when it's a little bit more subtle and weaved into the narrative pretty well, and I think Jordan Peele's proved himself to be capable of doing that, so I'm very interested and very excited to see what comes of The Twilight Zone on CBS All Access, though I do wish it was not on CBS All Access, much like Star Trek Discovery, because there are too many goddamn streaming services. So, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the questions you guys had, and then I'll just end it, and yeah, hopefully next time the stream quality will be better, and I'll figure this out. I probably just need to build a new PC. It might just be the laptop, quite honestly. I don't stream a lot, but who knows? We'll see. So, let's see what the questions are. How did the dance battle fit in? I call it a dance battle. That's simplifying it. The dance battle in the movie is it's when they're talking about the moment in which the doppelganger, which we find out later was the original girl, but the evil one, the antagonist, when she discovered she was going to lead these doppelgangers in like a revolution to go to the surface and tell everyone, hey, we're here. And it was when the protagonist, as a little girl, after the switch had already occurred, was doing this dance, like a ballet. She was a dancer. And of course, above ground, she's doing a ballet in front of an audience in a nice theater. But we also intercut that with underground, the little girl, because they mirror them. It's like puppets. They're doing the same exact thing, but a little bit differently. It's a beautiful dance up here, but down below, it's a very violent dance. But that dance she's making her do made all the other doppelgangers take note of her and be like, you are our savior, basically, which is a little weird, but it works in the movie. You have to see it to kind of get it. But the dance battle is effectively the crazy antagonist one, who's gone crazy now from being forced underground all these years with all these other doppelgangers, is like dancing around the room, and the protagonist is also kind of dancing around the room. It's not a literal like Guardians of the Galaxy dance battle, except for the fact that like the evil one is basically dancing, but also stabbing. It's a battle where they're dancing and stabbing each other. It's pretty good. Butternips? Question mark? That's barely a statement. That's not even a question. That's just a thing with a question mark after it. No Space Jam. This is a Toon Squad headband. I put that there on purpose. It'll happen at some point, especially now that I got all this equipment. Now that I have it, it'll get done, but it'll take a while. Don't hold your breath. Someone says, I can't believe Chuck E. Cheese reuses cheese. I don't know that to be a fact. That's a conspiracy theory I like, but I don't know if it's true. I wouldn't eat at Chuck E. Cheese, though, because if you want pizza, there are like a million better pizza places than that. Let's see, what else? Subtle, yeah, subtle was the word I was looking for, with like a deft hand. He's pretty subtle, but it's effective. Hugo, what do you think of dirty cretins who watch movie reviews without seeing the movie? I do that all the time. Ralph the Movie Maker does movie reviews, and I watch those all the time without watching the movie. So that sounds like a really underwhelming revolution. Viva la revolution! Hi, guys! They did the Hands Across America thing, but I should have mentioned, that was after they had already stabbed a whole bunch of people. There was, like, news footage of them stabbing a ton of people. So, it's a little bit of a mix of, like, a Body Snatchers movie and also a zombie plague, because they are going around and, like, attacking people in the streets. Specifically their own, like, they attack themselves for the most part, but if you get in their way, they attack you as well. So they did other stuff too. I was just trying to briefly go through the plot. Someone says, I've been hearing a lot of chatter about Love, Death, and Robots. You got any hot takes there? That's the new anthology. I believe it's CG animated series on Netflix. It's an anthology series that tends to do like sci-fi and robot stuff. I haven't really watched it yet, so I don't have an opinion on it, but that does exist if ever anyone is into anthology shows like I am, so it's on my list. I'll check it out at some point. Hey Hugo, will you ever interact with dirty plebs on Discord or stream games? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing this for, is just to try and like test to make sure my camera works and the mic works. They work, just the stream quality is real low, so I'm gonna have to figure out what that's all about. I got a Wi-Fi extender because I haven't streamed in my office, which is what this is, for a really long time, because the internet quality's shit in here. As you can tell, I thought the Wi-Fi extender would help. Maybe it hasn't. Maybe it's just my computer. I'm going to have to troubleshoot it. But I wanted to get a baseline of what's going on before I troubleshoot it, which is why I'm doing this stream. So yeah, it's really low quality, but I think you can hear me. So it works out. I use my hands a lot. I gesticulate. It's like 90% of what I do is gesticulate. But yeah, I'm gonna be doing a lot of stuff. I'm gonna do something similar to what Jake does with like taking out the trash. It won't be called that though. I'm not gonna steal his brand and shit. But it'll be something where I watch videos and talk about them, and I'll do other stuff too. I feel I have some books I kind of want to read on here, not in its entirety, obviously, because that would be a copyright infringement, but like similar to how we do Jordan Peterson, just picking out some interesting parts like bad fan fiction and stuff like that because I find that stuff funny. So we'll see. Um, Yeah, someone says it could be something simple like tweaking your OBS settings. Yeah, I do use OBS. I'm going to have to ask Jake. He knows way more about this than I do. I don't know the settings. I'll talk to him about it and see what he has to say. What's your thoughts on the Outer Worlds? I'm very excited for the Outer Worlds. The Outer Worlds, for those of you who don't know, is the new Obsidian game. They were just bought out by Microsoft, but they were already in the middle of making this game, the Outer Worlds. Obsidian is the company that originally created Fallout 1 and Fallout 2. And they did Fallout New Vegas for Bethesda, but then Bethesda fucked them over. If you don't know what that's about, Google it. And now they're doing their own first-person RPG called The Outer Worlds, which is set in a universe that almost feels a little bit like a fuck you to Bethesda, because it's Fallout-esque in the sense that it takes design and visual cues from a very specific era. This time it's like the era of sort of union busting and big corporations, but not like modern corporations, like before Teddy Roosevelt broke up a bunch of the big like robber baron companies, stuff like that. So it's that sort of aesthetic, but applied to space in the future, similar to kind of how Fallout does like post-apocalyptic 50s. It's sci-fi, but with that 1910s to 1920s, 30s aesthetic. So that's pretty interesting. I think it'll be good. I am really excited that it seems like they're putting a lot of emphasis in ways to complete quests other than just straight up combat, which is one of my big criticisms of Bethesda's recent RPGs. In an RPG, I like to be able to have options. I like to be able to talk myself out of most situations. Not to say that there can't be situations where you have to, fight. I get it, depending on the kind of game it is. Bethesda tends to do action games, but I like a little bit more RP in my role-playing game, so I don't know. I'm excited. Hold on. Let me go back. What did Finn says? Why do you hate my question, Hugo? What was your question? Let me go look and find it. Hugo, do you think the new Twilight Zone will be Black Mirror-esque? Would that be a good or bad thing? It wouldn't surprise me if some episodes are a little bit Black Mirror-esque, because that just comes with the territory. I mean, even the original Twilight Zone had episodes that sort of dealt with technology, but the technology of the day that was new and like fascinating to people was like air travel and space travel. So in those episodes, you have like people flying an airplane into a time hole because the sky was magic. So I'm sure we'll have some of that, because the modern technologies now that we have anxieties about, and that's what horror and sci-fi tend to be about, is what things give us anxiety. And Black Mirror taps into that with technology, because the big technologies now give a lot of people anxieties about privacy, about the way we're getting information, whatever. So I'm sure at least a couple episodes of Twilight Zone will fit into that category of like how technology and humans interact, and how human beings tend to find new and interesting ways to be terrible using our new technology. So a couple of them will probably be that, because that was in the original Twilight Zone, but I don't think that necessarily makes it Black Mirror-esque. I think, if anything, Black Mirror is taking something the Twilight Zone did very well and doing that expanded. Because the Twilight Zone did a bunch of stuff, not just horror and sci-fi, but like almost gothic horror too. They did an episode called The Howling Man, where like it was the devil's locked up in this gothic castle. Like, Twilight Zone has a wider spread of topics they can cover, whereas Black Mirror really hones in on that technology bit. So I think some episodes of the Twilight Zone will be like that, but not all of them. It just has a wider range of topics that they tend to cover. But I hope it's not just, and I don't think it will be, because Jordan Peele, at least from the movies I've seen so far, has a pronounced voice as a writer, and although he's not writing all the episodes or anything, he has a voice in the series, and I think it'll have its own identity. So. Speaking of Fallout, what's my favorite Fallout? Fallout New Vegas, probably. That's not a very original idea. I know that's a lot of people's choice, but that kind of ties into what I was talking about earlier with Bethesda's games that I don't like because Obsidian did New Vegas. I liked that there were more choices in how you went about completing quests. There were different options. It was pretty buggy at launch, but I think overall it felt the most balanced in terms of it is also an action game, but it's also a role-playing game. It balanced that pretty well. Better than I think Fallout 3 and Fallout 4 ended up doing. How many times have I wanted to say Jordan Peterson instead of Jordan Peele? Actually, surprisingly, pretty easy for me in this particular case. I don't know why. Normally I talk over my words and misspeak a lot, which I'm sure you've heard plenty of times during this, but that's one thing I haven't fucked up on yet. Now I've jinxed myself, though, so great. What do I think of Kenshi? What's Kenshi? Let me look it up. Kenshi. Kenshi is a role-playing video game developed and published by Lo-Fi Games for Windows. I have not played it, so I don't have an opinion on it. I'll check it out, though, if it's good. Alright, so I think that's it. I've been here for a little bit. Did my review. Got a baseline on how the stream looks. The answer is shit. But thanks for being here and hanging out with me anyways. I really enjoyed that. So hopefully next time when I come back, things will be smoother on the video end. I will confer with Jake and get sagely technical stream knowledge from him. So thanks, everyone. Yeah, until next time, I've been Hugo, and yeah, that's it. Bye.